Welcome back. All right, now we'll go straight into the conversation on the state of the nation, developments, and the impact of policies of the government on the average Nigerian. I'm joined now by Barrister Kelechi Anwu. He's a legal practitioner. He joins me now to do some justice on the matter. Welcome. Good afternoon to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a while. Hope you've been good.
It's a pleasure being here again.
All right. So before we go into the different policies, different decisions being made by the government, and how the Nigerians are feeling or responding to it. Let's start with an issue that is still trending at the moment, and this is the presidency rejects the European Union report on 2023 polls. What's your take on this? With the EU to an extent indicting the process to an extent, and the party who won and the presidency saying no, while we have opposition saying that they were right. What's your take on the entire matter?
First of all, if you look at the work the EU has been doing over the years, they've practically been involved in elections in different countries. And if you look at the standard upon which they operate, you understand that they don't just wake up and then go into, they take time, go through processes of elections. They were here even before the nominations. They were here even before the campaigns, and their report covers even pre the nomination period, the post nomination period, the campaign period, the election period, and post election period. Now you get to understand they've been on ground and they understand the climb upon which they operate on. This is what basically they do in every election, and in every country they observe their election. Now, if you also understand that the observers and the monitoring and election monitoring units are two different bodies of the EU, and both of them are on their separate level. Now, when the EU mission came to Nigeria, they took out their time, partnered with some NGOs, got the ones that are valid, the ones that are capable, and got Nigerians who were on foot at those locations that election happened. They had eyes almost in every corner of our election. That is how they operate, and that's what they did. So when they came up with their report, it was very comprehensive, to the fact that they have an inch-to-inch report of everything, an in-depth report of everything, the timing, the logistics, the funding, and every single thing that happened. Now, the federal government on their own rejecting this report. I don't know, when this report was presented to the INEC chairman, he was happy and he was laughing, not having seen the report. But now, upon seeing the report and seeing that the report is not favorable, everybody is crying foul. It is quite unfortunate. It is very, very unfortunate. Now, the EU report, if we go by the EU report, it is not away from what we have seen ordinarily play out in the election. And the EU report, from what it is, don't forget, the EU was part of the persons who sponsored the enactment of our Electoral Act. Now, the EU from time to time provide funding for the Nigerian nation. They also provide funding for the enactment of that act. They provided funding for the conduct of the election. To the best of my knowledge, the EU provided 17.6 billion naira for the conduct of and transparent election in Nigeria. Now, how do you say someone who made such provisions and expected a favorable, go back to your country, organize a free and fair and credible election, and you say they are not going to say anything? No, if you do not want their input, you should also not want their money, because as much as they are of persuasive, their reports are very persuasive, but it goes to tell how things went. You do not just sweep things under the carpet. Simply because we are a nation and the sovereign nations, we do not need anybody to encourage or discourage us. No, that is not what EU did. EU brought a report of what they've seen. There are observers all over the world and in every elections. There is the AU report, there is the CSO report, there is even the ECOWAS report. Now, all are pointing to the fact that there were irregularities in our electoral system, and there were man-made confliction in the process of our election. Now, what does this tell you? It points to the fact that INEC compromised their position. INEC did not give Nigeria what Nigeria expected. Nigeria expected a honest and transparent election. But what we had was a charade of an election. Now, this report, if you go by this report, it indicts every step that INEC has taken. From the date of the time of nomination, the logistics the INEC has provided, how the INEC spread its funding, and how the manpower the INEC brought in, even the collection that the INEC has made. He did not mince word. He said it the way they are, and the way they were on the Nigerian streets in February and the March.
Right, but what do you make of questions of the sovereignty of Nigeria and whether, these bodies should even have any say on what goes on? Although we know that Nigeria is actually the one who invites the EU during this election, and also you mentioned the issue of some of the funding being provided for the elections. But that aside, do you think that in any way there's any sort of influence, external influence, or attempts for external influence from other nations on the polity of the country?
I do not think so. I do not think so. Maybe directly, no. But however, these organizations and then international communities and even the local organizations that we have are policy formulators. They are not the ones that run our policies. Their own is just to provide assistance, strategic planning, and information to us. It happens in every country. There is no country that have no input from within and outside. Now, but these inputs are of persuasive nature. They are not binding. They do not. They are not of compulsion that okay, you must follow these things that we've made provisions for. But they are like they are a framework. They provide some kind of a framework upon which you work on. You can decide to choose it or you don't leave it. Now, what this kind of report does is going forward. These are places you've had hitches. These are places you've had sources. The places you've had sources, you need to take a lead on it. Then the places you have hitches, you will need to make an amendment and come up better. They are not imposing any of those recommendations. These are more of a recommendation. They are not laws. Nigeria is not led by any of those things. But however, it forms the basis of what a working document for all of us. It forms a working document for the government. It is not a must. They must assimilate every single thing. But a government which is thinking of going forward will learn from its mistake.
So how do you think the presidency should have reacted to
now?
this
The presidency should have reacted. Okay, yes, we acknowledge we are infallible. We are not infallible. We acknowledge that we can make progress. We acknowledge that we as a nation had shortcoming. We acknowledge that okay, in the forthcoming going forward, we will fix these places that we had shortcomings. That is how a responsive and responsible government address these issues, and not coming to condemn a report which every single and well-meaning Nigerian knows it is true. Even the government knows it is true. You do
not. It's interesting, really, but when people, comment on the elections, it's always good to remember that during the inaugural speech of the president, he said in his own words that this is one of the best elections in the history of the country. Well, you can't. Perhaps we cannot expect.
Those are his words. Those are there are counter reports.
Beneficiary of a report to of an election to castigate it.
Exactly.
But then Yar'Adua did so.
Exactly. I wanted to point out that to the fact that we had a president in late Omar Musa Yar'Adua who acknowledged that is how it should be done. You acknowledge the process which brought me in has flaws, and I dedicate that I shall make it better. That is how it is supposed to be. Do you go back? Do you continue in the flaws that you swam out from? No. The processes must continue to evolve and think of getting better. You don't just rely on your flaws and the hitches that you had. A country who ought to get better will learn from their mistakes and make corrections.
All right, fair enough. So let's head back now to that inaugural speech and the aftermath. About a month after that speech was held. On that day, historic day, some might call it, the president made a statement: subsidy is gone, and that just there and there, the comments had ripple effects even before perhaps the president got to his place or to the villa. So now we're a month into it, and Nigerians, they are doing what Nigerians always do. They are adapting, so to speak. But I'd like to get your thoughts on the situation of things, particularly with this new development. We have here that large consignments of premium motor spirit, particularly called petrol, are being imported by major oil marketers are to hit Nigeria from next week and may force down the price of the commodity, both major and independent dealers stated on Sunday. Now, what's your take on the way things are going and generally on the decision by the government and the way they went about it?
Now the things had gone bad in the past couple of days. In the last 1 month, it went from manageable to now there is the words on the street is shege promas. We are now seeing the shege promas. Now it is expected of every new administration. You don't expect they will come and do magic. Of course, we know we are heading to the doom. Even with the last administration, the last administration even came out to openly say that there is nothing. Nigeria is broke. When they say that, you should expect that, okay, the ones that are coming will not do magic overnight. So I never expected any kind of magic, but then there is this thing, removing fuel subsidy. If you agree with me that the fuels that are being sold now were fuel that were bought at the rate of 150, 170, nobody has bought anything into the country since then, and the removal of the fuel subsidy took effect from June 1st. Yes, and since then there has never been any. There has not been any. Now, what I do not understand is the hike from the usual 200, 195, 200 to 555 when nobody has imported anything. So they were still dealing with the fuel subsidy. I expected the government to maintain the stand that every single marketer sells at the price they were selling. That way, because they bought at the price it was subsidized, they had every right to enforce them to sell at the price they bought. If you had bought at 155, now the government has stated that you sell at 200. Continue to sell at 200, pending when we have this import, which is coming up in July. Just like you rightly mentioned. Now, but the government relaxed on that and allowed these marketers take advantage of Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians, and even the government itself. That's where I fault the government, because the government had every powers to order them to sell at the price they were selling, because there was no new import. Sell at the price you bought, sell at the price you were selling until we have a petroleum product that comes with the subsidy price. There is no, at the moment, there is no petroleum commodity that comes with that subsidy price that have hit the Nigerian market. So why are we having 550? maybe when they come in, the ones the subsidy removal affects, they will begin to come in from next week, just like you mentioned. That is when I expected the prices to triple. But before then, we would have had this easing off. The government, the people would have had it going a little bit well. Look at you would say somebody made this argument that does the poor have a car? Now, does the poor drink fuel? And that's a very wrong assumption to make. Now, the poor person enters public transport. Take for instance, the public transport from Kubwa to, let's say, Area 1 jumped from 250 naira to 700 naira. How do you explain that to a poor person who enters a public transport from Kubwa in Abuja here to Area 1 in Gariki, which he ordinarily paid 250 naira to 300, and now he's paying 700? Is it not the same car that is going to enter that has consumes fuel? Now, it is neither here nor there. It affects everybody. I don't know if the big men have where they buy their own fuel, or whether any other person have where they buy their own fuel, but this grossly affects the ordinary Nigerian, the poor Nigerian. It affects even the poorer Nigerian. With this thing that has just happened, it pushed more people into poverty because the purchasing power of every Nigerian has been reduced. The prices of commodities, edible commodities that have no nexus with fuel, tripled, because they will tell you, even those that brought it from their backyard will tell you, we are entering transport to convert these things. Fruits, vegetables, things at the supermarket, they've all tripled in their prices. And who are buying these things? Common Nigerians. It affects generally everybody. So I expected for the government to wade into this matter, make these fuel marketers to sell at the price that it is for. That is what the government, because they are still selling part of what was subsidized.
All right, but what do you make about the idea in general? People have been saying, is there really any need to remove subsidy when there are countries, even developed countries, that still have some form of subsidy in some areas or some sectors of the economy, and so on and so forth? What do you make of the fact that a lot of this is having direct effect, as you've explained now, on the masses, on those persons who are considered to be, earning below $1 a day? I believe the World Bank said recently that about 4 million persons have now dropped into the poverty, range, with expectation of about 2 million more. So some persons overnight, woke up and their status in the society was changed drastically. And we're saying that perhaps this is not happening too much or too obviously for the ruling class or the elite. So really, in the broad sense of it, is it a good idea to remove subsidy? Yes,
it's a good idea. It's a very good idea. It's something that should have been done in 2012 when President Goodluck Jonathan tried to remove it. By now, we would have adjusted and even gotten better. Now, why is it a good idea? Studies have shown that this fuel subsidy thing is the biggest scam that ever came out of Nigeria. Why is it a scam? It is because when we pay for, when they're using the Nigerian fund to pay for this fuel subsidy, they don't get the value of what they are paying for. Imagine Nigerian paying for fuel subsidy, and at the end of the day, you're seeing the fuel subsidy, some part of the fuel products that they are paying for in neighboring countries like Niger, Chad, Benin, and Cameroon. And half of the products are sold in those markets at their own market price, making much more gain than it is. Now, also, there has been insinuations that persons who, the cabals that run this fuel subsidy chain, are milking the country dry. They are just changing the country and making huge amount of money from it. Why? Because they do not actually buy the amount of figures that it represents on book. And when they buy, even the ones they buy, they divide it and sell to other countries. So does it really make sense? Let everybody. You remember when that fuel subsidy issue was removed? It was on the news that even Cameroon were angry. People in Cameroon were angry. Well, why would Nigeria remove fuel subsidy? Funny enough, they got the feeling of what we are feeling. They felt what we are feeling because they've been enjoying the fuel that we subsidize as Nigerians.
Well, isn't this corruption? This is not the subsidy itself.
It is pure corruption.
In the original idea.
Now, how do you checkmate the issues around fuel subsidy? It's run by syndicate. It's kind of it's run like an organization. You don't get to see the exact.
So is it so difficult for the president, the grand commander of the Federal Republic of the Armed Forces, to be able to stop this? Why take away the entire system? Because at the end of the day, people say
it will be very, very difficult.
Just to finish, there's a statement that people have been making, particularly the halves of the society. They look into, even on the studio here, no offense to them, but they look into the camera and they say to the masses out there, it was the rich people. They were the ones benefiting subsidy. Just like you said, someone who is watching this program and has paid 750 naira instead of 200, you're telling him that it was the rich people benefiting. And he's wondering, well, I think I was also benefiting because I was not paying more than times 2 what I'm paying now. So the question really is, at the end of the day, why do the masses have to suffer for the ineptitude of the government? Because like you mentioned about Cameroon, what happens is that this is another issue now, another failing of the government, which is poor border control. Because how do you import fuel and petrol, and it's so easily being transferred over the border that you've even given up that you can stop it, and then you end the whole program, thereby causing more trouble for the average person. So do you think perhaps the government is not being too open about their own failings as regards the subsidy issue?
And like I said the subsidy thing is like, it works like a syndicate. So the persons who are manning it are basically persons within the government. So how do you cut off the hand without it affecting the person who bears it? It will be very, very difficult. So the only way for them to end this whole charade is by ending it from the root, uprooting it from the root. Let everybody man it. Now, if the thing is that the leaders had no plans as to this, if they actually had plans since 2012, we would have gotten our refineries working by now, and there would be no need to import anything. Do we really need to import? We produce crude oil, so it's just for us to import to refine our own petroleum that we produce, and we'll get the end product here. Now we have refineries that are not functional. If this government every single year budgets and allocations are portioned to those refineries, there are staffs that are well paid in those refineries. For years they've been operational in their collection of salaries and emoluments, but moribund in terms of refining the actual crude oil that it was meant for. Now, how do you attend to that? What the government ought to have done is, okay, remove this fuel subsidy, or even if you had plans to remove it since 2012, which that was when this issue of fuel subsidy removal started. And now, if it didn't happen in 2012, make an alternative plan. Get those refineries working and remove the entire fuel subsidy. Now, by that, we will start producing. Funny enough, we have people who even produce these fuels locally. If you go to the Niger Delta, they produce these fuels.
Yeah, that's,
so why would government not invest in them? The PIB law has given enormous powers to the government. Deregulate these sectors. There is no need for monopoly. It's just like what we had in telecoms and then the communication sector. Before now, we just used to have NTA and maybe Radio Nigeria. But look at it today. We have KAFTAN, we have AIT. In telecom industries, we used to have only Nitel. But today we have MTN, Glo. If Glo bundle is not okay for you, you go to Airtel. If Airtel is not okay for you, you go to MTN. If MTN is not okay for you, come back to Glo. So that's how it should be, and it should be regulated. Deregulate this industry. Allow marketers, there are people who have private money. They are looking for where to invest. Allow people build refineries. You must not build refineries that will give 1 million liters. You can start with, let's say, 500. Let's assuming somebody has something that produces 500 in Abuja, another has something that produces 300 in Kwara State, another has something that produces, and we have it. We have people who have money in virtually all the states of the federation, and people who are interested, who are in either one way or another dealing with oil and gas in the entire 36 states of the federation and FCT. We have large expanse of land. We have it everywhere. So is it better to be transporting this thing across the seas, going overboard to abroad to refine this thing and bring them back? Deregulate these sectors. Let individuals have a mini refinery. Let them have a mini refinery, and let this thing, people produce these things. If we can produce locally without any government advantage, with a little support from the government, we do not need a very large expanse of a refinery that will cover Abuja. We just need to be producing small in different areas, and let government be up and doing to certify that they are in quality. That way we will bridge this economic gap. We won't have to import any fuel, and we won't have to deal with fuel subsidy or no fuel subsidy. I think that is the best possible option. Without that, we will have the same issues. Even when you import these fuels that are coming, we have a porous border. They will still take it out.
All right, that's fair enough. So we'll end this segment of the conversation here and go for a quick break. This is, I believe, one of the biggest of the president's plans as regards revitalizing the country. We'll take a look at more after the break. Just a moment, we'll be right back. And when we come back, our phone lines will be open so you can call in and join the conversation. Stay with us.